I haven't done one of these in a while. Welcome to Vince's Selfies. Here I am, outdoors, in a lovely park area, just walking around, and thought I would get back and talk a little bit about movies and things that I love, and also want to talk a little bit about what am I watching today, or now, or recently. And so one of the things I would love to talk about right now is, of course, Stephen King's It. But not just It, the new movie, It Chapter 2 that's come out, but I talked a little bit about all of the permutations, whatever. All the versions of It, including Stephen King's original novel, which I read many years ago, but absolutely loved, and I'll talk a little bit about that right now, as well as the original miniseries I did back in 1990. So, here we are, Vince's Selfies, movie talk with me, Mr. Feynman, Vince. So, how are you doing? Anyway, so let's take a trip back in time to the mid to late 80s. Actually, I don't remember when it was originally published. I know a lot of people out there could tell me that. If you'd like to post and let me know when it was originally published and remind me, I can look it up, but it's all right. But back in the late 80s, I guess it was. I'm pretty sure it was. Definitely late 80s. I did pick up a brand new hard copy book called It, written by Stephen King. Now, to take you back in time a little bit, I was a huge reader of Stephen King's books back in the 80s. Back in high school, back in college, loved reading his novels. Thought they were absolutely amazing. And I have to thank my father for that, because my father not really grew up, but in the 70s, he was reading Stephen King's novels as they were first coming out. Carrie, Salem's Lot, Cujo, all of them. As soon as they came out, my dad had to pick them up. Got them in hardcover or usually in paperback. Read them, and we just absolutely loved them. And then the movies were coming out, and I didn't necessarily get a chance to see a lot of those movies the first time around, because I was, let's face it, when movies like Carrie and all that came out, I was not even 10 years old. So they were a little bit too much for, my parents were not really that horrible parents. They weren't about to bring their 5-year-old to see the latest horror movie rated R. Especially movies like Carrie, which starts off with, well, if anyone has seen Carrie, starts off in the showers with the girls all making fun of Carrie. And let's face it, when you take a shower, you're not really wearing much clothing. And so it's not necessarily something that you want to be bringing your 5-year-old little boy to see. Not really appropriate. But anyway, many of these movies I did get a chance to see on cable. Some of them, I got to see a more edited version. So I was become a huge fan of Stephen King's books as soon as I could pick them up and start reading them. Salem's Lot, The Shining, all of them, read them all. Or missed a few, of course, but I remember having a huge collection in my house, in my bedroom, of all the Stephen King books. I had at least 10 or 15 of them, and back in 1985, that was a good chunk of his books. Not like today, when 15 is nothing compared to. But you have to remember too, this was at a time when Stephen King wasn't the Stephen King we know today. He was this guy who was still just cranking out novels left and right. Nowadays he is the king of that, no pun intended. But nowadays he's this amazing writer that everybody knows. So anyway, so I read the book, and I have to say, it still is, out of all of his books, probably one of my favorites, mostly because of the fact that it isn't just your typical horror novel. In other words, it's not a book that is about the scares. Many of his books are, sure. And let's face it, most horror books are about the scare. But Stephen King's books weren't always that way, and this one especially. And it's one of the things that I'll have to admit, at the time when I read the book, I just thought it was all about the scare. Didn't really think about what the book was really trying to say. Didn't get it at the time, I'll admit. Like I said, I read it when I was 16, 17 years old maybe, I don't remember. But I wasn't not that I even am today, but I wasn't really realizing the subtext of the story, and as I do now. But nowadays, I look back at that story and go, wait a minute. This wasn't a book about the scare. This was a book about the story, but really, it was really about getting in touch with your past and putting your past to bed and killing the demons that have haunted your past. And that's really what the book is about. The book is not about the scare. The book is about the story, and it's a reason why this particular book is written in 2 different time periods. It starts off with these, hold on a second, as most people know who know the story, the story takes place in 2 different time periods. It starts off when these children are set in the late 50s, early 60s, I forget when the book is actually set. I think it's the late 50s, when these kids are kids and they're all tormented by bullies. This main bully played by, named Henry Bowers in the book, and they're just tormented by a monster in the underground, but as well as just being bullied in school and just your normal everyday stuff that kids would be tormented with. And then when they're adults, they have to go back and defeat that evil as adults, and they're like the only people who can see this evil. There's a subtext there which I never got as a kid, because like I said, I was a kid, I was stupid. And that is that the book is about defeating your own personal demons. Because we all have that. And that's one of the reasons why the book works so well, is because we can relate to that. We all have personal demons that we have to defeat sometimes. We have to look back at our childhood, at our past, and kill it. Go back and say, you're not going to be my future. The past is the past. You learn from it, like the monkey says, Rafiki in The Lion King. You can learn from your past, or you can run from it. Well, they need to not run from it, but learn from it and defeat it, and so they can move on. So they can forget about it, and they can just be in the present and live their lives, which they eventually do, spoiler alert. And that's one of the reasons why that book works so well. And for me, out of the 3 versions of that story, the book is still the best, because King was unfettered, because at that point he'd become so popular that he could write whatever he wanted and didn't have to worry about censors and people saying, oh no, you can't publish a book that's over 500 pages. I forget how long that book is, but it's not 500 pages. It's quite lengthy. And because it is, Stephen King is able to take his time, tell the story, tell it his way, scare the bejesus out of you, but also tell the story the way he wants to tell it. And it is 2 complete stories, the children and then the children as adults. And it's just absolutely brilliant, and it's the way it is with most stories. The book isn't always better, but for the most part, many times, especially this one, Stephen King, you can't best the way Stephen King tells his stories. And that's the biggest problem with many of Stephen King movies, is that you always lose that. No matter what you do, you lose Stephen King's voice. And it's because it's just a different medium. So, now let's move into the different medium. Let's talk about that 1990 miniseries. Now, the problem with anybody who hasn't seen the miniseries already, the problem with seeing it now is that you will always miss out on that experience of seeing that miniseries when it was brand new. When it was brand spanking new, and you didn't know what to expect, and you had never seen it in any form before. You'll lose that. Also, the time period has changed, and we're not, shall we say, that style of filmmaking, that style of special effects and everything of that nature is gone. We've now moved on, and special effects are better. I don't want to say acting is better, but it's just a different style of filmmaking that was. And also, it wasn't made for TV movies, so it was made on a TV budget, and so there's only so much you could do. Plus, it was also made, since it was made for TV, apart from the budget, you also had censors. So you could only do so much when it comes to a horror movie on TV. There's only so much you could do, because you had censors, you had commercials. You couldn't do a full-blown R-rated film. You couldn't. It just wasn't possible. Censors would have never allowed some of the stuff in Stephen King's novel to appear on television at 8 or 9 o'clock at night. And even at midnight, it still wouldn't have shown it. Some of the stuff in that book was just way too intense. In any horror movie, you couldn't show it. Most movies, like at the time, The Godfather any of those R-rated movies and would try and show them on TV, they had to edit them down. They always had that little disclaimer at the beginning of the film, edited for television. So for it, you could never do it the way it was written. You just couldn't. It just would never be done. So with a horror movie, that's always, shall we say, the death knell, shall we say, of doing any horror film. But I have to say this, despite the fact that they didn't have a made-for-TV budget, they had to use made-for-TV actors, so all the adults are played by TV actors like Tim Reed from WKRP in Cincinnati, and John Ritter of Three's Company, Harry Anderson of Night Court. Everybody in the film had some kind of TV credit to their name, and they weren't necessarily top-notch movie stars. As a matter of fact, none of them were. The only one of the actors in the movie who really was a quote-unquote movie star would have been Tim Curry, who played the clown, Pennywise. But even him, the movies he was making, he wasn't the star of the films. He was the villain, like in Legend with Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise was the lead of that. He was the villain. And Clue, where he was the butler. And he pretty much keeps the story together, but he's not the lead. That's an ensemble piece. So he was making movies, but he wasn't a leading man type. Rocky Horror was probably the closest thing, and even that, he's the villain. So, having said all that, how does the film stand up? Well, at the time when I saw the movie back in 1990, thought it was absolutely amazing, loved it. Had a hard time with the ending, absolutely, because Stephen King's ending is incredible, but to film the ending, let's put it this way, in a nutshell, it's much easier to describe something than it is to film it. Because the way Stephen King describes it is, you're about to see the scariest thing you've ever seen. Now, to film that, it's really hard to do, and especially on a TV movie, you can't film the scariest thing you've ever seen. It has to be something that you can show on TV. So they basically told this story of what he wrote about, but it was a made-for-TV thing. The special effects were really cheesy. I think even then I thought the special effect was cheesy. And nowadays when you watch it, it's incredibly cheesy. But having said all that, my personal review of the miniseries is, if you haven't seen it, check it out. Because it does retain Stephen King's story. And that's what makes that miniseries still work. The acting was very good. Tim Curry was an amazing Pennywise. The other actors in it play really good, believable versions of the adults. Unfortunately, like I said, made for TV, so there's a lot of schmaltz in it. And because it was made for TV, there's a lot of, shall we say, TV acting, because they knew every 10, 15 minutes or whatever, they're going to have to break for a commercial. And when you watch it now, you can see those spots where it's like, okay, the music swells, and then it goes to the next scene. You're like, oh, that was where a commercial was. So yeah, that's in there. But if you go in there knowing you're watching a made-for-TV movie and not something that was shown in theaters, I think you could really enjoy it. Because for me, the made-for-TV film really captured the story, and that's, again, what I said, what drove the book, and it drives the miniseries, because it's not about the scares. But unfortunately, a lot of people, I think, still think of it as something that's all about the scares, because it's it, and because it's Stephen King. So overall, I just watched the miniseries again, and I still, well, I should say, I don't find it scary. And because, like I said, made for TV, can't really, do too many scares, but the story still works. The story is still there, and the actors do a great job of conveying that story and conveying the characters. And I will admit, in the beginning of the story, and spoiler alert, the book and films all start off with the death of a child. And I'm to admit, when I was watching that, when that little boy is about to be brutally murdered, I was tearing up. I was, just thinking about it. And it's not even so much because the scene was so well done, or whatever, and it was well done, but it's not so much about that. It wasn't about the filmmaking or the quality of the acting. The little boy was great. Whoever that little actor was who played Georgie in the film, in the first one. Did a great job. You really felt for this kid, and you went, and especially when you know what's going to happen, you're like, no, 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 don't. And I'll admit, I was welling up because, like, oh my God, just to think about that happening to a child, it rips your heart out. And throughout the story, when things are happening, and it's not even so much that when I was watching the miniseries, I was going, oh, well, it's the miniseries that was capturing me. No, it's the story. And it was imagining those things happening in real life. And that's what really got to me. It's getting to me now. So now, how does that hold up to the movie? Okay, so now we've got two movies, It Chapter 1 and It Chapter 2. As I'm filming this, It Chapter 2 is playing in the theaters. I just saw it last week. And if you want my personal reviews of them, I'll tell you. In comparison to the book, of course, nothing's going to hold up to the book. The book has so much more story, and it's got Stephen King's voice. The miniseries doesn't have that, but still has the story. And even touched on things that the new movie, spoiler alert, completely skipped over, because the new movies obviously had to change the time period. They decided not to make them period pieces. In other words, not set the second half of the film in the 90s or the late 80s as the book was, because they wanted to bring it up to date. But if they did that, that meant that you can't set the first half of the story in the late 50s, early 60s as the book was, or the original miniseries was, because that would make the adults in their 50s or 60s. If they were, actually, yeah, if they were born in let's see, they're supposed to be about 10 or 12 years old in 1960. Well, that would put them in their 60s right now. So, yeah, put them in their late 60s. Actually having them almost pushing 70, and they weren't going to hire a bunch of 65-year-old actors like Demi Moore or whatever. Not that there's any reason not to do that, but that's just not what they wanted to do. They wanted to hire young actors, and so to do that, that meant they'd have to set the movie and set the whole movie in modern day. So I mean, move the era up from the kid's story from the 60s to the 80s. But you know what? Now, most people would probably say when they saw the original film, they probably thought, is that going to work? And when you saw It Chapter 1, it worked. Why? Because the story is still there. It doesn't matter that it wasn't set in the 60s, that Henry Bowers is now a bully in the 80s as opposed to a bully in the 60s. The time period makes no difference. It can be set in modern day. The story works. It doesn't matter that we're now in a different time period. The story still works, and it's great. And many people like myself thought, oh, how are you going to best Tim Curry's performance as Pennywise the Clown? You're never going to find an actor who's ever going to be as good as Tim Curry was. And Tim Curry was absolutely amazing as Pennywise the Clown. He was brilliant. Well, the new actor, Skarsgard, his first name has now escaped me. Peter Skarsgard, I believe it is. Is that his first name? Peter? I think so. Anyway, regardless, he is brilliant. And he scared the bejesus out of you in that first film. But now, I will also say this. Having said that, when I saw the first movie, I did think that if you had never seen the original miniseries and you didn't know anything about Pennywise or anything else, you would have found it a lot scarier than I did. I really didn't find Chapter 1 that terrifying. I enjoyed it. I thought the new Pennywise was absolutely amazing, without a doubt, Skarsgård. And the effects and the acting, everything about the new movie was great. But was it absolutely terrifying? Was it really all that scary? No. But for me, it isn't about the scares. It's about that story, like I've been saying. And this one, and Chapter 1 captured that. Now, we get to Chapter 2. The big problem with Chapter 2 is that you have all this build-up. It's been a year since Chapter 1 had come out. Everyone's been talking about it. It's now out on video. People have been talking about it, been renting it, buying it on video, watching it on whatever way they watch their movies at home, whether it be Netflix or whatever. Everyone's watching it, everyone's having a good time and talking about it. Now they can't wait for this one. But the biggest problem with any kind of a monster movie, any kind of a horror movie, is once you see the monster stops being scary. What's scary about any kind of a monster movie is is your imagination and what you don't know, what you don't see. Something in the dark is much more scary than something in the light. And the big problem with It Chapter 2 is that, well, we've seen what Pennywise can do. We see him being scary, so it's not really going to be that scary anymore. It's going to be really hard to scare. And people are going into the new one thinking, again, this is all about the scares, that they're just waiting to be terrified. And I saw the movie, I saw Chapter 2 last week and absolutely loved it. Think it's amazing. Think that all the adult actors in it are great. My favorite was Bill Hader, Saturday Night Live, Bill Hader. Seeing him in a dramatic role. Of course, he's playing a comedian as Harry Anderson, who was also a stand-up comedian in the first film. Yeah, he played the comic, so it makes sense that they got another comedic actor to play the kid who grows up to become a comedian. But his dramatic work in it is absolutely amazing, and I felt that, wow, Bill Hader was just great. Now, I've heard some people talk about the special effects and how they felt that the CGI just wasn't that great or whatever. I didn't notice that. Personally, I thought that the CGI was fine. It served its purpose and did a great job. And I didn't notice any bad special effects in it. Did I find the movie scary? A little bit. But it wasn't one of those movies like The Exorcist where I was walking out ready to throw up or couldn't go to bed at night. No, I saw it during the day and I walked out thinking, wow, it was great. But I wasn't running under my pillow saying, no more clowns. I loved it. I thought it was funny in parts, scary in parts. But again, overall, it was about the characters and about these people now having to defeat their demons. And it was, to me, it works more as a drama than it does a horror movie. It's just a drama with a freaking scary clown that likes to become other things. Now, granted, if you're a fan of the book like I was, you may be disappointed that certain aspects of the book were changed and certain stuff that was in the movie, it was in the miniseries, didn't make it. Spoiler alert, I will say this. If you're going in there loving the whole storyline about the stutterer, Bill, and how as an adult he becomes a writer, and they're making movies out of his books, and he's married now to a actress, and in the book and in the miniseries, the actress is worried about him after he flies off to Derry, and then she goes and she comes chasing him down, and she ends up getting captured by Pennywise and taken down into the sewers. That storyline isn't in this film, and I was a little disappointed it wasn't there, but it's all right. If you're not expecting it, you're not going to miss it, because in the end, does it add to the story? Yes, it does. But having its absence doesn't take away from the story, because the director in this one obviously wanted this to be more about the kids and their relationship with each other. Also, a major change is the character of Stan. Again, spoiler alert, what happens to him in the book and in the original miniseries is the same thing that happens to him in this new film. But they added a little bit at the end to give Stan's death, spoiler alert, more meaning. And I actually like that because they both work. Let's put it this way. In Stephen King's novel, I don't remember that being the way. I have to read the novel again to see if he did that, but I'm pretty sure that was something that was completely added for this new film. And they add a little bit for him at the end of the movie, and it makes that character's makes what happens to the character mean more. I will say that. And it actually does add to the story, as opposed to just being a random act, shall we say. And I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed this new change. I wouldn't say that it has to be added for the other films, and that since that's not in the other film, shall we say that's hurts the stories? It doesn't. Just as the absence of the wife in the new film doesn't hurt this new story. It just changes the story. It's just a different version. And I think that It Chapter 2 is absolutely great. I would recommend it. I'm not saying you're going to like it because I know a lot of people who saw it and hated it. I personally liked it. I would say if you saw it Chapter 1, you definitely need to see how the story ends. Because again, it's about the story. And if you take it as that, if you take it about the characters and you look at it as more of a character piece and less about a scary movie, it's a character piece about demons, and that Pennywise is their own personal demon that they have to defeat. It's not about the scares. It's about that, and that's what Stephen King's novel was about, and that's what the miniseries I think got away from, because the miniseries tried to be more of a horror movie, but because they couldn't, they ended up focusing more on the characters, and that was to the better. That made the whole thing much better. And that's what. And I don't know if the director of It Chapter 2 realized that was what he was going to have to do, but he just said that he decided not to make a horror movie, but instead make a character piece with horror elements. So that's all I wanted to say. So anyway, so that's my review of It by Stephen King, the novel. Stephen King's It, the miniseries made back in 1990, and It Chapter 1 and It Chapter 2, the films starring Bill Hader and a bunch of other great actors. And my personal review is, still to this day, big fan. Big fan of all permutations of It. And if you get a chance, if you are a reader, and even if you're not, you should read Stephen King's novel. Absolutely, read that novel. It's amazing. And check out the two films. Especially if you're not a reader, then you'll enjoy them better, because you won't know what you're missing. In other words, you won't, because that's the problem with sometimes with people reading books and they go and see the movie like, oh well, this wasn't in the movie. This is my favorite scene. Well, the problem is, as we all know, a movie is not a book. And there are certain things you can do in a book that you can't do in a movie, and there are certain things you can do in a movie that you can't do in a book. Well, yeah. So, and a movie is a different medium, so you need to do your own thing. So the directors do it, they have to make it their own. They have to change the story, they have to do this. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, whatever. So, there you go. Vince's Selfies. Here I am. I just did a walk outside here in the woods. Here I am in the woods talking about it. Whoa, this is kind of creepy. Whoa. There I am in the woods talking about it. All right. So maybe I'll go take a look in here, and I hope that there's no scary clowns in here. Wish me luck. Go see it. Go check it out. And I'm not saying you'll like it. I'm just saying my opinion is well worth the time to go check out It Chapter 1, It Chapter 2, It the miniseries, but definitely It the novel by Stephen King. Thank you.